monopoly capital, but just monopoly capital instead, saying that monopoly capital does exist in different parts of the world. But let's take you quickly to that briefing now. David Mahlobo, about to address the media.
Where we presented the work that we did in the Commission over the last 2 days. And our report has been accepted and noted the issues that were raised in plenary. But the understanding is that the issues that are discussed there, they are not actually final resolutions. These are the matters that were brought a lot of ideas together, consolidated them, so that at a particular point when the NEC has processed the report out of the outcome of the National Policy Conference, these matters are going to go back to branches. But equally, the ANC is going to continue to engage with society on the issues we're raising, so that ultimately in December in the National Conference, we should be able to make final decisions. Some of the key issues that we did look at them, we did an assessment of the security situation of the country over the last 23 years and had an assessment of the recommendation to say, if you look at the previous conference resolution, how far have we gone? We concluded that the country, in terms of stability comparatively with other countries of the world, we are relatively stable if you look at the challenges the world faces with respect to issues of security. But at the very same time, we also reaffirmed the strategic thrust of the work we do as guided by the National Development Plan, which is Vision 2030, around the issue that people who are living in this country, they should be able to feel safe at home, at school, and everywhere. But we also have to create a capacity in the state, in the criminal justice, to deal with those particular issues. But at the very same time, we have done an assessment to say, if you look at our security architecture as a country, what are the key issues that we need to look at? And broadly, those particular themes, we did look at the main issue, which is the territorial integrity of a country, of our state, and a number of issues emerged there to say, what are we dealing with? We also had an opportunity to look at the threats to the well-being of South Africans. You know, the key issues around crime that we face. We also had an opportunity to look at the authority of the state. We also had an opportunity to look at issues of the economy. If the economy is not responding well, how does it actually migrate being from an economic issue to become a security issue? And then the last two issues, we had an opportunity to look at the scourge of international terrorism, because our country could not be saying that it could not be spared. Every country remains vulnerable. And then lastly, it was the issues around information security and cybersecurity. Beyond that, we then had to look at a number of key decisions that we made around those particular issues. We also had an opportunity to look at what others, they normally call it, they actually call it color revolution. That countries, you normally will have challenges, that if you don't do certain things, those that seek to influence you can influence you because you've created conditions to do that. We actually had to look at it to say, are there forces that seek to undermine the authority of our country on the basis of our own issues? We have also said that we need to tighten the issues around the management of migration, which is a major issue because migration is a global phenomenon. People are moving around, it's one globe for various reasons. Others are asylum seekers, but others, they are just moving because on the basis of economic opportunities, and others are moving for various reasons. And how should we actually put legislation to deal with those issues? Those are the issues we raised. But at the very same time, in terms of a number of legislation that has a relationship just to deal with those issues. We also had to discuss the issues of our ability to say, what should we do differently to strengthen the management of our borders, which is part of territorial integrity. The use of technology there in terms of our border systems, the issues of dealing with ethical conduct and corruption in some of the officials that are there, but also to deal with the issues around illicit flow of goods that you'll find in our borders. And we say that what else do we need to do differently, but also working with the neighboring state. We also had an opportunity to look at the issues of the management of our national key points, like the airports, like others, and say, what should we do to ensure that those port of entry, because they are able to facilitate the movement of people and goods, they are secured, and more importantly, we're more worried to say, how do we play that part to ensure that they are secured mostly by South Africans under the authority of the state, because it's an important issue. Well, the other issues that we have to deal with are issues around corrections, correctional services. In the main then, we were dealing with an assessment to say, looking at our prisons are actually overcrowded, it's a reality. But we also have done an assessment to say who's in these prisons. And we have some numbers where we've discovered that a number of other people that are overcrowding our prisons, there's a lot of other foreign nationals that we get to be arrested. The figure that we gave was 6,440 who are actually serving in our prisons for nearly 10.6 years in the main. And if you look at that particular figure, normally we said that 4 in 10 of the 6,440, those foreign nationals, they are committing various aggressive crimes. But our attitude as the ANC, crime is crime, irrespective of your nationality. It must be dealt with. But when we did the assessment, we're also dealing with an assessment to say, how do we use our international treaties to do prisoner exchange so that we can be able to do some of those particular issues, but also to deal with overcrowding. How do we actually ensure that there is a program of rehabilitation? Those people who have petty crimes, they are integrated back into communities and be able to do certain issues. Well, we also had to deal with issues of home affairs. Generally, I think I've spoken about in the main is issues of management of migration, management of our borders, but at the very same time is how home affairs structural in terms of the fit for purpose, it becomes part and parcel of the security architecture of our country. There was a serious discussion, and we continue, we think that they play an important role. We have also said that the issues of creating an entity, not an outsourced entity, but an entity of the state called the Border Management Authority. It will assist us to pull resources together, improve coordination, issues of efficiency. But then there is a process of reviewing a number of legislation there. The immigration law, some of the issues that we've discussed there was to say, how do we actually use migration in a manner that we can only be in a position to attract skills that the economy needs? But there are certain areas around low skills jobs where South Africans can be in a position to be able to do some of those so that you can be able to manage the tensions that you normally find in communities. That's the issue that we thought we need to be able to do. But we're also saying that as a country, we should have a credible database so that we can be able to understand who's in the country, what by what, village by village, so that you cannot have a situation where you don't know your neighborhood, so that you can be able to ensure that other matters of security are taken into account. We also dealt with the issues around defense, reaffirmed the constitutional imperatives that our sovereignty and territorial integrity is hindering on the defense force. But we also have said that the Defence Force can not only do matters of defence, but we can also be able to use defence as a driver of economic growth. If we can be able to develop our defence industry with respect to research, innovation, to be on the cutting edge, we can be able to actually get defence to actually contribute to the GDP, but not like in the days of apartheid where it was militarized, being used in terms of the brutality against our own people and the neighboring state, because in the past, it used to contribute about 20%. That's the main work that we're looking at. With respect to the military veterans, we have reconfirmed the decisions that were taken in the past. Remember, in 2007 in Pulugwan, we agreed to establish a ministry. In the meantime, there is a Ministry of Defense and Military Veterans as one. There is a strong view that we should be able to conclude the journey of actually giving a standalone ministry to be able to deal with issues of military veterans. And the suggestion is to say, before the end of this term, we should have done that. In other words, 2018-19 financial year. We have also taken a decision to say, the plight of military veterans, what are the other ways we can be able to actually create an income so that the benefits are taken care of, and also the issues of the experience that is there with military veterans. How do you use them, especially in the private security, to have private security owned by South Africans, for South Africans, so that you can be able to do their deployment, including issues to say how they can help in other areas, including in the ANC, because our combatants, they were not only trained on military issues, but they were also trained politically. How can they assist in political education, issues of promoting discipline and cohesion within our ranks? Well, we had an opportunity also to discuss, the matter is not new, the matter around private security industry. In the private security industry, we have actually appreciated the role that this industry has grown. It contributes to job creation, which are employment opportunities that are there, but it also contributes in terms of crime fighting. But we still have some issues that we're raising, that our strategic key installations, national key points, we can't as a state in terms of sovereignty, that foreign-owned private security firms, they should be able to guard us. But we need South Africans to do that. Then the industry should be in a position to work together, transform it, so that they can continue to do those. Other issues that we're a little bit aware of is the exploitation and the employment of non-nationals and some poorly trained individuals that are supposed to be handling these high caliber weapons that are there. But we are not saying that there is no space for private security. It should be there. How does it get deployed as a phenomenon that happens internationally? We should be able to get that one moving. And we are saying that the regulation that is sitting with government must be able to proceed and sign that law, which is SIRA Act, into law, and be able to deal with the concerns that are being raised by industry, because at a particular point, the industry was threatening to take us through litigation if that legislation was passed. On justice and constitutional development, there are a number of issues that we raised. One of the issues that we noted, the integrated criminal justice system. A lot has been done. You remember the example we saw around the question of the World Cup. Speedy investigation, prosecution, that capacity that we created. And we can be able to say, in terms of drawing lessons, what can we do much better to be able to continue with that? Because if we don't improve the efficiency of the systems, the issues around the trust deficit remains a problem. It takes time, people go in there, then they are able to escape, even if they've committed heinous crime, because probably with our investigations, the readiness of our dockets is an issue. But we're also saying that we're going to migrate and ensure that we modernize the system itself in terms of using technology, because you can't have dockets that are actually getting missing in their own system. Those are the main issues we have raised. The transformation of the legal services of fraternity in terms of the support of black lawyers in particular, and how the state is providing cases, a deliberate attempt, other than to actually have same faces all the time. These are some of the issues that we thought we should be able to raise. Then there are a number of legislation that we think needs to be overhauled around this particular issue, especially if you look at the issues around crime and corruption. The issues that are raised by our people to say, in many instances, the law that actually pertains to bail, and we have seen certain instances where communities are saying, no, you can't just apply the law without doing consideration. Therefore, we were able to say, let's be able to look at the laws around bail, witness protection, but also including the issues around petty crimes, which are defined in Schedule 1. Certain crimes must be harsher sentences. Instead of regarding them as Schedule 1, regard them as Schedule 5 and Schedule 6, where they are becoming much tougher sentences. We also did discuss the issues of the transformation of the judiciary. That over the last 23 years, a lot has happened. But if you look at the employment equity imperatives, but then there are issues that we need to be able to deal with beyond the employment imperatives. Issues around the attitude, orientation of the system itself, whether there are weaknesses. We also dealt with the issues around the separation doctrine of the three arms of state, the judiciary, your executive, and also the legislature. How do we find a balance? What are our rules of engagement? So that we will not have views about encroachment, about overreach in some of those issues. On fighting crime and corruption. On fighting crime, we have noted that if you speak to a number of South Africans, they are feeling that violent crimes are on the rise. And we have seen the brutal killing, barbaric one, of women and girl children. And there's a view that probably we want to coexist with crime. The issues around the use of drugs, narcotics, and other illicit issues that are there in our communities, we are investigating other opportunities to say, what do we need to do different? One, to have successful prosecution. Well, we also have to deal with the question of law, where normally if you are given a life sentence, but if you look at that life sentence that you are given vis-a-vis the law that actually deals with parole, you sometimes, after a particular period, normally around 25 years, you should be in a position to apply for parole. And these people are back into the system. The other issues is around the parole system itself. Over the last few months, how does the system itself take into account the views of the victims into consideration? Because sometimes when people are on parole, they go back into the communities. While they're still there, even when they're on bail, they do other issues that they continue to commit crime. On corruption, we have actually continued to say the resolution that we took in the 53rd National Conference and in the last NGC, we reaffirm our decisions that we should not tolerate corruption, irrespective where it raises the ugly head in the position we hold, because it robs us of an opportunity of the resources that are there. And we should be able to deal with corruption, whether it's in the private sector, whether in the public sector, because corruption is corruption. And then we are actually looking at some of the ways that the corruption issues and the cases, because to prosecute corruption cases, it normally takes time. Normally, corrupt individuals, they have the resources, they can drag matters over a number of years. And at the very same time, then you can have an impression that we are not dealing with the scourge of corruption. I think that's the summary in brief, because if you look at the security of the state and the work we do, we also discuss the economy, Comrade Zizi, them, especially the illicit economy, the transfer pricing, the issues of the flows in terms you could see the things that are happening in our borders, but more importantly, the issues of illegal mining and the wars that are happening there. You have seen in Free State, you see in Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal, Mpumalanga, Limpopo, everywhere. illegal mining has become the biggest issue that is there. It has became a biggest a lucrative trade. And how are we actually going to be doing operations there to clean up the space while at the very same time the country is not robbed of the necessary resources? As I've said in the beginning, these are the issues that we have actually in principle consolidated them. Then we should be in a position to refer them back to the organization through the structures. And in December, the matters will be refined more until we actually come with clear policy position. Thanks, comrades.
Thanks, David. Any questions on that note of Zamazamas? Budvuyo. Please wait for your mic.
Vuyo Mvoko, ENCA.
Imake Budvuyo, imake. Kumlethatha ipen ka Hajra. You'll be the first. Proceed, Budvuyo.
Yes, if one takes your penultimate point, which is corruption, you said we shouldn't tolerate, you are concerned about the time it takes to prosecute and so on. But when we are talking about the transformation of the judiciary, you didn't give any specifics. When you say you have, we are raising issues of attitude and orientation of the system, are you saying that it is not aligned to the sort of issues or principles that you would want it to be aligned to? In other words, the attitudes and orientation of members of the judicial system is not what you would like to see. Is that what you're saying? And the same would go for the separation of powers. You are raising issues of encroachment and overreach. Are you saying they are overreaching or they are encroaching on the, say, legislature and the executive?
Pass it to Marin here in front.
Good evening, Marion Merton, Daily Maverick. Can you give us a little bit more clarifications in terms of the discussions you had around the authority of the state? What did the commissions feel? How do they want to define it? What is the authority of the state? How does the ANC Peace and Security Commissions, how do they see that? And perhaps you could also clarify something for me. In terms of discussions with correctional services, what was the reason of focusing on 6,414 foreign nationals convicted of crimes out of a prison population of 162,000, according to Stats SA? And were the discussions perhaps not also going around the fact that around 50+% of people in our jails are those who can't afford to pay bail? Thank you.
Okay. Hazra, Ms. President in the front. Hazra and then Clement. I think you've got a soft advice, I can hear you.
Hajra Marji from Power FM. I'm also a little bit confused given what the ANC and its leaders has said in the build-up to this conference around the judiciary, and more specifically what the President said on our constitutional democracy, that you spoke so little bit about the judiciary. So can I ask you to expand a little bit on that, as well as the separation doctrine? What were some of the recommendations in this regard? Secondly, I'm not sure why Peace and Stability didn't identify state capture as probably the biggest threat to our security and weigh in on this issue. I mean, if some of the allegations are true, then there are some who are trying to turn the ANC into a black Boerebond, and I would assume that you would be concerned about that.
Clement Manyatela from Eyewitness News. Clement. Did the Commission at all discuss the so-called foreign forces that want to push for regime change? I remember hearing a lot of ANC leaders describing, for example, the marches by South Africans for President Jacob Zuma to step down as being influenced by those foreign forces. Was that under discussion? My second question is on the national key points being guarded by private security. The MKMVA previously took a resolution at their last elective conference to make suggestions to government for national key points to be guarded by MKMVA members. Did you entertain those proposals? Thanks.
My last two questions, Pete, and just behind you. Oh, yes.
Hi, I'm Claudia Malevich from Business Day. Minister, I just wanted to find out,
One round.
in terms of the police, are you worried at all at this stage about the state of the police? There's a multitude of acting heads, which influences the stability of people that should be protecting our sovereign state. And then also in terms of contributing to the GDP on defense now, has there been an agreement that the NEL should go back to the defense? Thank you.
Pete?
Minister Peter de Tooy from Huffington Post, you said that the Commission decided rather, or agreed that the ANC should not tolerate or accept corruption. Was state capture discussed in that context, given the deluge of reports in the public domain about wrongdoing and the extent and depth of state capture and the apparent unwillingness or inability of the government to act on it? Thank you.
That question was asked by Clement. Yeah, no, asked by Hajra. Minister, I'm left with only 3 hands. I think you should answer those, and then I'll take my last hands.
I thought I'm not minister. I
No,
I thought I'm a member of the Peace and Stability Committee.
I thought I would correct that as well.
I'm not reporting on behalf of government, but thank you very much. With respect to the question that is asked by Vuyone, I think the question has 2 elements. One of the elements that we are trying to raise is the efficiency and the speed at which we take to actually have successful prosecution with respect to matters of corruption. And you will know that sometimes investigations are taking long, and sometimes because sometimes these people have more resources, they get the best lawyers, they track, and we can actually start the inefficiency and the failure of an integrated justice system. It gives us problem to actually curb corruption in a manner that we could be able to say it sends a message. Irrespective of the institutions we've created, you know we have created many institutions as this ANC-led government. You have your Chapter 9 institutions, they do this work. We have your SIU that they do this work. We have the Office of the Auditor General that is them. You have the Public Protector. You have a number of bodies that deal with issues of corruption. But how do you ensure that when these reports are there, they are presented to the authorities in a manner that the cases, they become winnable? This is what we are actually referring to. And when we look at the example of 2010, we say, what examples can we be able to draw? When you actually do intelligence, prosecutorial-driven investigations, so that you don't actually have an investigator or a detective. They come to the site, they go to the prosecutor said we have not actually collected actually credible evidence to be able to do that. I thought we should be able to deal with that when we raise the issues of integrated systems and the efficiency of the system without clouding with other issues. The second issue that I think we are asking, we raise an issue about the transformation of the judiciary. The transformation of the judiciary, we are referring to issues of attitude. We are also referring to other historic issues. That the judiciary itself, in terms of our approach and how we actually do certain issues to be able to be responsive to what is an outcry of our people, we should be able to do that. The issue that you cannot actually ignore, which is a topical issue over time now, is that when you look at the state, there are arms that are there. There are 3. We have a legislature, we have the executive, and we have the judiciary. There is no arm of the state that is more superior than the other. And how these arms of the state, they do their respective duties as enshrined in constitutions without creating the tension, because there is a tension around the arms because of one reason or the other. And our commission then said, let's look at how do we regulate our rules of engagement so that we be able to actually respect our various roles, our independence in terms of our execution without issues of overreach or issues of interference. We never wanted to actually, as a commission, including plenary, to start to be actually pointing fingers. We are looking at matters of principle and policy, because if the policy is much clearer or there are certain gaps that are there, we should be able to deal with those issues. On the question asked by Miriam around the issue of the authority of the state, when we use the matters around the authority of the state, normally from the National Security Strategy or Assessment, we normally refer to the matters that talks about domestic stability. The matters that we're always raising here, one of them is the issues of violent protest, which is an issue that we normally talk about, whether in the education sector, whether in the public transport sector, whether for service delivery reason. Those are some of the issues that we talk about. But in the same space, when you speak about the authority of the state, we are also talking about issues around crime, your transnational organized crime and other forms of crime. But if you find time, just look at the discussion document. We never wanted to go through this statement in detail. But those are generally issues that do you deal with them as you look at the outcomes, which is outcome number 3 in terms of the government language there. With respect to why did we choose to single out 6,440 non-nationals? The ANC is a listening organization, and there is no way when South Africans, they started to say generalization to say foreigners are the ones that are causing criminality. But we're to do an assessment to say what extent, if you look at our prisons, who is there, for what reason. And this is an important analysis that we've done, is to say our prison from an overcrowding point of view, the burden to the fiscus, what should we do different? Remember, countries in terms of our international agreements and treaties, we can't be able to do prisoner exchange. And this commission has said that for petty crimes, we want these people to go back to their respective countries so that they can be hanged there and serve their sentences. While those who have committed serious crimes, heinous crime like murder and others, we want them to serve their sentences here in South Africa. We have no other reason. But when it comes to committing crime, crime is crime, irrespective of your nationality. And this is a message that as a leader of the society, we don't want to profile individuals because of their nationality here. On the issue Clement you have asked, you know that the document, we did discuss the issues of forces seeking to undermine our revolutionary advance. It's a big discussion. But, and we've actually done an analysis what it does in various forms and what we need to do. If you can see, one of the issues we're actually talking about is issues of espionage, issues of subversion, that is them. We don't want to create an impression that South Africa is loved by everyone. We're part of the global community. We know who our friends are. We know who our enemies. But whoever wants to work with South Africa, come through the right door. Don't try to strong arm us. We are actually a country, a sovereign state. If you want to do business, do business. If you want to build friendship, do that. You know, sometimes people say because of our own mistakes, we want to do a scare tactic about a regime change. Let me just advise you how does it normally take place. You know, there are normally 4 things if they want this thing to succeed, what they call it color revolution. 1, you actually establish entities that you'll use as a vehicle to influence. And we're on record. We've said certain NGOs, they play that game. Others, they play their part. Well, with the other thing that we're actually looking at, number 2, they actually look at the issues of promoting of an ideology. You know, how do you promote an ideology? There are actually certain terminologies that you use. We have seen it in Latin America and you have seen in the other countries. you use certain issues around ideology of there is no leadership, no vision, corruption, civil liberties, and this ideology you get it to be actually moving. The third element is to create and cultivate leaders. You know, create celebrity leaders, alternatives, and it takes place everywhere. Lastly, we use government failures if you want to drive color revolution. It's a doctrine in intelligence. Government failure, the ANC is to recognize that if we don't respond on issues of governance and our failures in governance, we create conducive environment for others to be able to exploit us. Therefore, we have done an analysis. That's why we're saying what we need to do, we're very clear. The issue around the national key point and private security, our message, private security plays an important role in this country. It has a place in this democracy, like everywhere. Our concern is foreign ownership. Our concern is issues of espionage. Our concern is exploitation of workers and employment of non-nationals there. The last one is the poorly trained individuals and the storage of that weaponry, because the caliber of the weaponry is very powerful. What we are saying, any country worth of its sovereignty, you will never outsource your national key point. If you want to use private security, it must be South African-owned private security. Therefore, the view by MKMVA is receiving support because veterans, whether from the former liberation movement or veterans, military veterans, even from the Bantustan or the TPV states, they will all have actually an opportunity to do that work. And some of them are doing more work internationally. Therefore, it's not something unique that we're raising. The issues around Claude that is asking around SABC, we did discuss them. We've agreed that the stability in the security cluster is very important in the administration, irrespective which department, whether is it state security, whether is it police and so forth. Let's stabilize administration. And when administration is stabilized, operations are going to be implemented in our program. We never wanted to single out one department. Stability, professionalization in the cluster, and issues of proper training, remuneration, including issues of dealing with corruption in our own. We thought we should deal with that. Daniel was discussed, and there is a proposal to say to increase our capability in terms of research, innovation, and remember that our Department of Defense, in the main, we are the ones who are actually acquiring that technology. And it's not something new. In the past, Daniel used to be an ABSCO, used to be part of the Department of Defense. That well considered to drive our strategic capability as a defense industry. That recommendation has been made. On corruption and state capture, we chose to discuss policy, not events or incident. Remember, here is a policy conference. We have taken a decision that corruption is a cancer. It must be dealt with, irrespective where it comes from. As a member of the NEC, and comrades who sit in the NEC, we have made a decision about state capture. We have said the president or the government should be able to proceed to actually do the judicial commission on these matters. And we are looking forward that these matters will be deposited in other matters, because the relationship between politicians and business is an issue that we should be able to find a way. How do we relate? In as much as our relationship with capital is a struggle of unity and opposite. All of us were friends in business, but do they control how we think and how we do certain things? There's no one here who doesn't know a friend in business. Probably yours is not in a stock exchange, maybe mine is a cooperative. But generally, We think the matter, the NEC has decided on it, and we think the decision should be implemented. I think I've done what you asked me to do.
You've done well. These two in front, Andy Siwe, no, Anikwazu Hleba. You can hear every conversation while seated here. Right at the back, and then I come to SABC. No, I'm just taking 3 hands now.
Hey, they're like a commission now.
No. I want the mic here. SABC behind you, and then right at the back. That's all. I'll take you in the next round. Next round in the next commission.
Minister Mahlobo, my name is Mdlengana from SABC. I would like to know as to whether there was a concern raised with regard to the state of intelligence in the country, taking into consideration the recent incidents of robberies at the headquarters and the high number of incidents of destruction of public property or trains, schools, and we hardly hear of any successful, if there is any prosecution on these matters. Thank you.
Amakhalang.
Good evening, I'm Khalang Bata from Bloomberg News. I just wanted to ask if the matter of bringing back the death penalty was discussed, particularly under the justice banner that you talked about, because the Women's League president did mention that given the surge in violence against women, that was a consideration they wanted to put forward.
Right at the back. Please pass. That's my last hand for this commission.
My name is Kelda Norma from ANN7. Minister, just wanted to ask, you said the commission discussed about color revolution. So was the role of media discussed as a forces of color revolution?
Was? Just repeat again, was what?
Was, you said the commission discussed
Color revolution, yes.
Color revolution. So was the role of media discussed in terms of forces of color revolution, or regime change, anything? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mahlobo.
No, thanks. I think with respect to the issues around intelligence, I think we should be able to know that we are a powerful vehicle to communicate and educate. Sometimes people don't know. In intelligence, you gather information, you give to the operatives, and they move. That's why I was speaking about integrated justice system. But when people, they choose to be politically, they say other people are sleeping on their job. If you have intelligence, you can't actually scream and say you have intelligence. Let me make an example in Vuan. We knew Vuani Malamlel a year ago that it will happen. Oh. Can I proceed?
Two in front. This briefing is disrupted by Bloomberg.
You know, my problem is that probably one day, working with our communications team, we must be able to find time so that you familiarize yourselves about certain subjects. Because some of the questions that are being asked, with due respect, they demonstrate the lack of understanding. You know, when you get intelligence, you give it to the police. There is also crime intelligence. Then you do the deployment. And when these particular issues, they don't happen, do you want to find a scapegoat? Probably we have to do a closed session, then we'll take you to how does the doctrine work. But in terms of actually having early warning system, what needs to happen, we can tell you. Comrade Ziz was sitting actually in the NEC. The same question was asked. Leadership of Limpopo was there. They told us that intelligence gave us information even 24 hours before it happened. And then how do we actually coordinate our work? When you get intelligence, how do you deploy? And how do you actually deploy effectively? And how do we actually do the arrest and be able to do successful prosecution? The example you have made, a number of people who have been arrested when actually these protests are happening or only this burning of properties. But what is our problem is our ability to get successful prosecution. One of the things that we also discussed in terms of law is when you are actually having a mob, who do you say that actually banned the car? And how do you use some of the information that we're doing? Those are the issues that we're grappling with. But I think it's a question that I've received in my deployment over the last 3 years. Probably I must start to share how do we move from point A to point Z on the map. On the issue of femicide, we did discuss it. When we discuss the matter of femicide, there are views that death penalty must be relooked at. But you know the ANC position. We're a humane organization. Because of our history and our past, we know where we come from. And death penalty is not a deterrent. Is not a deterrent. And if you are going to bring back death penalty, if we're actually going to change police, we are going to have issues to say, do we have a capable criminal justice system? So that you don't make mistakes like in other countries where you actually go for capital punishment and get people killed when they have not committed anything. But the ANC position, plenary has confirmed with respect to death penalty. The message that we've been given is to say the heinous crimes perpetrated against women and children and other vulnerable people, what do we do differently to send a message that crime and society can coexist? How can we actually do the overhaul our system? An example is about the witness protection, that particular act. You know that if you put an affidavit, you are a witness. And in terms of the Criminal Procedure Act, I've seen you as a person that has killed someone. Then I eliminate the witness. And what are the chances for someone to speak on that affidavit? These are some of the issues when we're reading under justice to say we have to overhaul our legislation to be consummate with the complex nature of the crimes we face today. But with a view that we need to be able to say what is the role of community to dealing with issues of crime. On color revolution, we never discuss the media. But what we discuss is to say, if you wanted to do an agitation, what platforms can you use? The media is the most powerful tool in the hands of any humanity. You can actually use the media for peace, for justice and development. But you can also have a situation where media can actually be exploited for other things. It does not actually happen in one country. It happens in many countries as a tool. Therefore, our relationship with the media and how should we be able to engage? We are not the enemies of the state. But the reality is to say, are we actually reporting in a manner to report objectively in terms of the doctrine and the training? But that's why I decided to give you the example, how does color revolution take place? Color revolution, it happens in terms of 4 phases. And those are the phases that we have given, because if you don't do the literature around color revolution, you will define in a particular way, and you will see actually regime change agents all over when they don't exist. But when they exist, we have the capacity to see and educate our people the forms and the nature it takes. That's why the branches and the plenary and the commission were to actually increase our level of alertness and vigilance, because you don't want people to start to collaborate wittingly or unwittingly with elements that seeks to undermine our sovereignty and democracy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Good evening to you. The next commission is ready. Miriam from International Relations. Thank you, David.
Well, ANC NEC member there, David Mahlobo, just briefing the media on the Peace and Stability Policy document, mentioning quite a number of things pertaining to South Africa's stability, saying that in terms of the stability situation in the country, we're quite stable, and essentially people need to feel free in the country. Territorial integrity of the country is quite important as well. They certainly did look at what role crime does play when it comes to the stability of the country, looking at the economy as well. Some utterances, perhaps some would say that if the economy is not doing too well, perhaps that could contribute towards the escalation of crime in the country. I think porous borders is one of the things that will certainly...
It cannot afford at this stage of the game just to talk in terms of broad principles. It has to talk specifics. And especially at this crucial interface here, this commission reported on issues of how the ANC performs acts in government. And that is where those issues, referring to them, are really non-negotiable.
One of the major issues, I think, that was also mentioned there in terms of strengthening management of our borders. Porous borders has been one of the main issues relating to South Africa. If you look at, if you're going to be able to manage who's coming in and who's going out, quite a lot of emphasis also put on the colour revolution. We also saw that mentioned in the report that was given by the Secretary General of so-called foreign forces that are trying to destabilize the country. Back then, when the Secretary General gave his report, he spoke about fees must fall, the anti-Zuma protests, as well as the Marikana massacre.
Yes, yes, yes. So it comes in as, take it from whence it comes here, because the ANC and this ANC is highly concerned about the Zuma fees must fall movement, movements, for example. And in terms of Zuma, everything that we saw around mobilization, NGOs, that features here, and they are going to dismiss it. So it's very important that broad state policies do not become party political policies here.
Prof. Boyson, we're going to have to just cut it there. We have to go back inside there as the next briefing is about to get underway, and we understand that will be on international relations.
And this report will be further processed after plenary, of course, and the final report will be presented